Why are we facing high cost of living in Africa, and why is life so expensive?
Many people are blaming their governments because of high cost of living. Maybe yes, maybe not.
Continue.
But people are facing high cost of living not only in Africa, but also around the world. Many households are struggling to make ends meet, and this is entailed by high inflation, high interest rates, high taxes, low wages, rising electricity, fuel and energy prices, war in Ukraine, high cost of housing and rent, poor productivity, and low economic growth.
But what is inflation?
Inflation is the broader rise of prices of goods and services across the economies, eroding the purchasing power of both businesses and consumers. In other words, money in your pocket will not do much far as it did previously. It will be worthless because of things like poor government spending, fluctuating exchange rates, high cost of imports, among other factors.
So, what are the factors behind very high cost of living that we are facing today?
One of the factors is the COVID pandemic. During the pandemic, the economies shut down. But in late 2021, the economy reopened. Therefore, people who had accumulated their savings during the pandemic wanted to spend it. So this led to the rise of demand of goods and services. But the firms were not ready to deal with the surging demand. Firms laid off staff and there was low investment. There was also supply chain issues whereby there were shortage of containers from countries which were still under lockdown, like China. This led to severe demands, low supply, and skyrocketing prices. In other words, it was a combination of excessive demand and cost push.
Did Russia's invasion of Ukraine affect the current high cost of living?
Russian invasion of Ukraine shot up the price of oil, gas, petrol, energy and food prices. This is the time when most countries wanted to buy more oil from Russia, but the supply was cut because of Russian sanctions. This is when also farms and retailers took an advantage of rising oil prices and inflation as an excuse to put up oil prices in order to increase their profit margins. This inflation also caused a shortage of sunflower, maize, wheat, oil, causing a serious cost push inflation around the world.
What about low wages and unemployment?
This has been a very long-term problem since 2009 financial crisis. A country faces low wage problem because of poor productivity. Poor productivity comes by because of lack of investment and technology. And therefore this places the government into pressure towards its financial position. This makes governments to raise taxes in order to finance public services. Low wages brings about low income and financial insecurities to individuals, and therefore they can hardly meet basic needs and therefore rely on informal sources for goods and services.
And what causes high costs of house rent?
Housing and house rent is closely interrelated with low interest rates. And low interest rates attract a cheap mortgage, whereby it brings about real estate investors and potential house owners. And because of this high demand of housing, the supply becomes low, and therefore it skyrockets again the prices of house and rent. Also, most people use 40% of their income on transport, rent, and energy. Also, we have urbanization and high population growth rate, which has brought about high prices of rent and housing.
Do you think most people are pressed in this economy?
Yes, most people are pressed because most people use 90% of their income on only essentials like food, transport, energy, health, and others, and giving them no room for maneuvering. This has made prices to be so high, and the most affected here are the most vulnerable than the rich.
Then what is causing high prices of food in Africa?
Rainfall pattern, climate change, post-harvest losses, decreased agricultural productivity, poor infrastructure like in transport and logistics, whereby with poor road network, food cannot be able to reach on their specified market on time. All these, among others, is interconnected to high food prices in Africa.
Is high taxes a cause of high cost of living?
Yes, government taxes makes the price of goods and services high, and therefore making the cost of living high. Though this taxation tends to be a burden to an individual, the government does this in order to finance other sectors like health, education, and social security. Though at times we as taxpayers, we never get services according to the tax paid. It ends up in corrupt individuals.
So, what is your conclusion?
This is my conclusion.
Continue.
Cost of living is in the mercy of fluctuating oil prices, interest rates, tax burden vis-a-vis services delivered, good governance, and fighting corruption. Governments should therefore address inflation, unemployment, housing costs, energy expenses, food prices, poor infrastructure, high taxations, which require comprehensive approach like policy interventions, job creation, investment in infrastructure and development, and agricultural reforms. This will improve the cost of living. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more.